picture of how I got into it and where I got into it and when, you know. That kind of pushed me into like a lot of official things really quickly. And yeah, I didn't have enough knowledge to like be able to go to the people that I should have at the time to like read through all of these copyrights and all this stuff. And I can give one really good example. And that's like, I think I've talked about my stuff on like MTV and like ABC Family and all this other shit. And like, pretty much that's a result of a really long stream of ghost producing for a certain group of people and all that stuff. And at the end of it, pretty much, once I did start going to people and talking about true music business stuff and really like arming myself with it, I flipped it on the guy that I was working directly with, and I said, I'm not going to accept any upfront payments anymore. I'm sorry. You have to split it correctly. I want 100% writer's rights, and I want 25% publishing rights. And he, like, you know, came at me hardcore. Was just like, you know, man, it's not that much money on the front end. It's only gonna be back end stuff, dude. And, you know, back end can happen maybe next year, or blah, 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 blah. And, you know, for something that would be, say, like one track, you know, for like one spot. And I've done stuff for these people, like for like True Detective. Like I had some stuff on the first season, but it was ghost produced, and it was like one-off tracks that they were like syncing. And just because I'm really good at creating moody shit. And like pretty much I stood my ground on that, and he made a deal for 75 tracks. And, you know, deal's already made. He needed those 75 tracks one way or another. And if I wasn't willing to do it for the lump sum, he had to do the rights. And so, yep, still making money on that today. And I made that deal 5+ years ago. And I've made other deals like that, post that. And I make royalties off that too. So it's like cut ties with those like big marketing executives, and I'm still making money off that deal. They said I wouldn't be that much money. Like literally every royalty quarter I make money from that deal, in like a big way, because it's still huge reruns and shit. It's like almost the whole soundtrack. So anyways, like just to sum all that up, you know, you just want to really just know exactly what you're getting into. And as a producer, it's really just, what am I signing? And if you don't know what you're signing, take it to somebody who does, you know, like, and say if you don't know anybody who does, you know, hit me up and I can check through it, and I can also hit up some of my legal friends as well. So there's always a way out for that kind of shit. You're not trapped. That's what you got to know. All right, so, you know, Creative Commons, final point here. Again, you can sample any of this shit and use it in any of your stuff. So that's really cool. Freesound.org is crazy weird. There's just the weirdest stuff. Like, man falling downstairs. Is there a sound for that? Oh, there is one sound for that. Oh, that's some good shit. All right. All right. So, yeah, you can do anything with this stuff, and you know, I also make a couple points in here about like what that means, like once you copyright your stuff, and like can you sample certain things and what things are usually Creative Commons. Like I make a point in here that, you know, classical music, Mozart, Beethoven, all that kind of shit, and a lot more, pretty much are fair game because they died so long ago. So there can be no, you know, in perpetuity of blah blah blah, you know, because, and this is actually like what happened here is like Disney changed the copyright law so they can own Disney's, you know, thing longer, their whole brand, you know. So that's why it's counterculture to be dead mouse. That's really what he's talking about, and I respect him for that 100%, especially when he did it. So I mean, it's just ironic when he gets pissed at people for copying him. He became what he hated, mate. Oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. He did it. All right, so another thing that's really hard to sample is jazz music, and I should also make it a point. I keep on clicking that. That dub and reggae is also very hard to sample. So do not sample dub reggae and try to release it. They will come after you regardless of how big you are. Kanye might not give a fuck, but dub reggae people will. And this is something I learned from like my mentor. He was just like this dude who used to manage like the Beastie Boys and Mixmaster Mike and shit. And it was just like part of the studio that I used to work at. And yeah, he said that the Beastie Boys got into a lot of trouble for that before they were big. And so like that's something you don't really want to do, just because all that stuff only happened like in the 70s, so that's pretty close to now, and they also capitalize on a lot of that stuff. But yeah, jazz is also something you can't really sample, and this is true as well. As somebody who used to play jazz and do like combo live stuff, we used to do farmers markets and all things like that, and after a while, I think it was when I was like 16, like we couldn't play standards anymore at the, you know, festivals around here, just because it became this much. And you know, I learned that because I like asked my band teacher at the time, and he told me that was the case. I was like, oh shit. So you know, we actually do play fake books, and the fake book has all those same songs but wrong notes. Almost as good. All right, so you know, you can do a lot of stuff. This is the stuff to like kind of keep in mind, you know. So if you're a descendant of a like legacy like Philo and the Coltrane family, then you can sample anything from that family, you know, because that's part of your legacy. That's part of your family's legacy, and the arm of the copyright outstretches to you. All right, so cool. We set the groundwork, and we're going to move forward now, because that's what we do. So last week at the end of class, I talked about channeling your influence and doing stuff like that. You know, choosing a sample based off of something that, you know, you resonate with, as opposed to something you think people would like or whatever, just something you like. You know, especially with like choosing bootlegs and doing all that stuff, it's way more organic, and you know, nothing's really ever out of style if you really like it still. So there's always going to be somebody who shares your, you know, likes and dislikes about something. So let's jump into it, man. Let's jump into it. All right, so I'm gonna get into some like sampling here. We're gonna talk about like loop samples first, because looping samples is like a huge thing. Say with Nero, with everything. That's probably the easiest form of like really taking control of your sample. So I'm gonna load up some of my resamples here. There it is. Those donk resamples I made that on Sunday are just pretty chunky. Alright, that'll be good. Alright, so I'm gonna drop this just straight up into the track here. And if you're not in Ableton native, you know, like if you're in Fruity Loops or Cubase or anything else, you know, this is a skill that can also be transferred. This is not native to Ableton. And I say that because I'm not native to Ableton, you know, so where I first started doing this was in Reason. And when I started getting into people like Culprit and Cohen Sound and, you know, that type of stuff, like Neurobass, like that Bristol shit, that's when I really started getting into, you know, like doing this stuff with samplers, because read an interview once that they were using NNXT, and then I started resampling Maelstrom into NNXT, and it kind of like blew my mind how many layers I could stack on one layer and kind of make things sound cool. So, you know, how does a typical looper work, really? And this is, you know, a decent way to show it, because this actually kind of looks like the Polygon one as well. So length is going to be your end point of your loop. Loop is going to be your start point. So you have start and end, but those are really just your kind of like endpoints for the entire sample. So what's cool is that you can go and automate all of these parameters like in a more sophisticated sampler, like sampler, you know, and then also add like a ton of crazy FM into it and really go deep into the sound. So it's definitely a really powerful tool to get into. I want to get like a more Reese part. Alright, it's cool. So I want to focus on a little section here, shift my loop point, start point of my loop. So I'm crossfading here, and this is kind of like a big thing that you want to like kind of get into the habit of doing, is creating loops and then blending it with crossfading. So in the warp modes here, you can't actually crossfade. It becomes like a hard cut, but you can actually make kind of like interesting sounds with that. So say if I like started it from right here because I liked all three of these sounds and I wanted to try looping all of them, some of them, I can automate this. So that's just kind of like a baseline sound, or, you know, the base of a baseline sound, you know, to kind of throw into a bunch of processing, and then also not have to worry about how to actually find a crazy sound inside of a synth, you know. So you can just kind of load up your own resample library and then start kind of like cracking into it in a lot of different ways. And I'm sure if y'all are into Nero at all, you've probably seen like Cursa or Frequent or anybody like that. And those dudes are definitely like a wealth of knowledge on this type of process specifically. So you can actually, you know, do like this, or, you know, go and straight up, you know, reorder things inside of the timeline with just straight up audio. But this actually gives you a lot more functionality here. So just utilizing the actual loop on this section here is going to make it like really flexible. So, you know, other points I made in this outline here, you know, with melodic samples and noise samples and drone samples. So I'm going to leave this up here because I'm going to go and start like doing some more transforming to this. This is not like, this isn't the end of this donk. So let's make some effects with noise, and this is more looping effects. Noisia. All right. So I'm gonna load this back up into Sampler. So I'm actually gonna make the effect in the timeline here, and I'm gonna make pretty much a riser for, let's make it 8 bars. So C3 is always gonna be your root note on basic mono samplers. You can't actually change your root note. What the root note means is the actual original pitch of the sample. And if the original pitch, say, is kind of like off C at all, you know, it's just pretty much saying, what's the original speed? C3 is always going to be that original speed. So what that does is allows the original speed to kind of shift towards C. And then when you play a C, it actually plays C. It doesn't play a G or something like that. All right, so I'm going to utilize this loop here. And then I'm going to have it kind of like pitch up over time. So what happens when you pitch up a sample that's looping is it speeds up the loop. All right, so this is a little bit limited in here just because I don't have like a ton of control. And I don't believe that we can't control pitch bend range in here. Not that I'm seeing. So I do this in Sampler or something where you can modulate the actual pitch bend range in here. And also, you know, just because you're controlling the pitch of a like kind of tape-based sampler, if you slow it down, it also has kind of like the same effect, where it will stretch out the sound. So you can hook up a bunch of stuff to like pitch bend with like macros, say in like Serum or something like that. On Serum, I actually make a lot of effects just because I can do a lot of semi-modular stuff like that. But yeah, this effect also is pretty cool with anything else, really. Just because it's just kind of capitalizing on what's happening with the mono sampler, kind of like speeding up and slowing down with the actual like pitch of the sampler. All right, so now I'm kind of like just holding this loop range and like scanning through it. So it's going to keep on jumping to where the start position of that loop is. So I can modulate things like that. Like say LFO to loop start. And then we'll go LFO to loop length, but we'll have that go in a negative direction. So it closes, goes left. So also note where I'm keeping this end flag. So this allows me to modulate to all these things around here, or just I guess points where the actual loop can modulate in between. Yeah, exactly, Stosu. Just because like this is now getting into sample and hold. So sample and hold here is going to be something you could apply to any of these. Just because now I can go and make that loop, you know, because this is modulating in positive values, so going this way, and this is going in negative values going this way. That's what's happening when it's moving all over the place. So I can even, I guess, offset those two modulation sections here, because I do have this little semi-modular thing going on here in sampler. You just don't get the granular modes, and the granular modes in Simpler are really cool. But you can do this all in Contact as well, and way, way, way more, as well as in like Polygon and other stuff like that. This one's just really accessible. And, you know, also to that point, if you have Ableton and you're just, you know, using, and this is the case with a lot of people, that I know, you know, you're just using it for like tracking or whatever. This is another cool little sound design thing that you can do with it, because not only does it have this stuff going on, it also has this FM oscillator built into it. Hence why I even made it, you know, a big point in here, because sample FM is actually really, 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 really cool. With, you know, just with all the possibilities you can do to modulating kind of like random sampled material. So like if I was gonna, you know, do all this modulation to the sample start and end, and I was gonna do loop length negative values, we'll put this at a different increment here. It'd still be pretty fast. All right, so you know, you can do a lot of cool stuff with sampler like this, including assign pitch bend and stuff. So that's another thing I like to modulate, like sample offset. Sample offset is another cool, really cool thing, especially if you're working with the bass, because you can assign your sample offset, which sample offset means this. Sample start, pretty much offsetting where that sample's going to start. So I can kind of like scroll through the sample again, but you can assign that to velocity or key value in order to actually change the sample inside of there. So that's a really cool thing to scroll through your own stuff with. And that's actually something I learned from Mr. Bill. And Mr. Bill was actually one of the first people I started watching back in like 2013, 2012, around there. That really opened my mind to a lot of like really cool glitch effects and stuff. And yeah, so I highly recommend Mr. Bill for a lot of stuff. So now that's randomizing, and I'm blasting FM into this noise samples. Now it's going to sound like bit crushed and distorted. So now I can even modulate the pitch of the sample only or the pitch of the oscillator only with this LFO. All right, so that's crazy, dude. That shit's nuts, bro. So what I'm doing again, just to kind of like rehash, I'm kind of talking about this noise stuff I was going on in here about. And that is definitely really crucial for, you know, like making a ton of effects. This is not just random noise glitch effects. This is like risers. If you're like going to do some real sound design work, this is what they call whoosh sound design. For like movement stuff. You know, what that means is when, you know, like somebody who's asking you for like UI effects, which I did some stuff for like the Google phone thing. And it was just like UX, user experience sounds. So it needed to sound like a whisper. It's like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. So that's all like noise effects. Yeah, that's the kind of shit that, you know, might be asked to do as a sound designer. But definitely, you know, for making like really cool glitchy stuff. Like I got to work on this Nike like shoe campaign. It was like 10 videos like on Instagram, and you know, just like the ad campaigns you find on your phone and stuff. It was for their Pegasus line. And that was a ton of glitch effects and just white noise because they were just like, yeah, I want to make it sound like fucking crazy. And then she turns into a hawk. And then the shoe turns into a robot. Yeah, exactly, Ori. You know, because when you're actually looking in texture, and that's actually a really good point that he's making there. Just pop ballads. Yeah, when you're working in, you know, beats and texture and tones, like this is all literally just little samples again. Granular is not like a mystical thing where it just becomes granular, you know, like a metallic sheen. It's now like Metal Mario. When something becomes granular, it's now like Super Saiyan. Like it's a different type of energy. Like no, it's just a sample. And now they're spitting out different samples at different sample sizes, fluctuating, creating a randomness to those sample sizes. And texture is really cool because it goes in like really fine values up to the 100 splits. And I list in there about grain delays as well, like Crusher X, Aetherizer, Valhalla Shimmer, Crystallizer, that's Sound Toys, Max for Live, and Clouds. That all kind of works the same too. And also all delays. All delays are samplers. They're samplers that play back looped signals. So it's pretty much what it's doing in its essence of like what a delay is. Hence why I'm talking about it in sampling. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. So, I mean, say if I took this sound where I'm making some randomized glitch effects, and randomized means random values in a modulator, you know, really doesn't take too much thought besides sample and hold. This is the sample and hold or random step modulation, and that's what they call, you know, sample and hold in sampling terms means holding on one individual sample. Sample and hold in modulation terms means holding on one value and then sampling another value. Yeah, totally. Crystallizer is insanely good. It's probably one of the best grain delays in plugin form. And it's like used on a ton of like top 40 stuff. That's like the top 40, just overall sparkle effect for choruses. Choruses meaning like the chorus of a song. You know, people use like delay effects to make it sound broad, and grain delays allow you to shift the pitch and also have like this kind of sparkle and sheen to it. And we'll talk about what a grain cloud is as well. And they're kind of the same thing. They actually are the same thing, but some grain delays don't do everything a grain cloud does. So make that distinction. So say if I just like took a random sample, let's go into strings. Epic. Crazy, bro. So what if I attached LFO speed, so LFO1 rate to pitch bend? All right, so say if this was an Alicia Keys track, you might not be able to tell that it was Alicia Keys track. You might be able to say in the core of the law that this was transformed because you're only using one waveform from Alicia Keys' voice, and that Alicia needs to chill out because sometimes, you know, the public can have a little waveform, you know, it's a little. All right, so that sounds pretty crazy. Like if I saturated the shit out of this and then added sub, you know, this would be like a full-on Reese. And you know, this is a orchestra hit. You know, again, depends on what you drop in there. It's gonna sound different. So all of those sounds sound different. That's with stock, bro. So if like your stock plugins can do all this shit, then you can make this sound with stock plugins. That's just how it works. All right, so let's move on. So next thing I was talking about in here, and this is something that is very, you know, don't really need to go too deep into this. Actually, this is kind of very, well, we already talked about sample and hold, but this right here, this is kind of like the thing that Omnisphere does really well, where it's able to stack a wavetable oscillator and a granular oscillator, and pretty much, you know, play them back at the same time and keep them key tracked to the same thing, and also really just have good quality all around on it. And it also has thousands of patches that paid sound designers are, you know, paid to make, kind of like people like Richard Devine or something like that. Omnisphere is a really big thing that I'm not really going to get into right now, but say if you didn't have the money to get Omnisphere, you know, Absinthe is a good alternative, but also knowing the key components inside of what that routing is all about is really simple. Ambient drone samples can be looped alongside pad synths in order to create textures for insanely complex sounds, sounding patch. I missed the ing. Whoop. Whoop. All right, so you know, say if I made a pad in here, let's just make a dual oscillator, kind of like sawtooth pad. So I do that, and then I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, and all of that, and then I grab one of these, and then I drop them in here. Oh, actually, no, I'm gonna drop them out here, and then, you know. All right, sounds interesting. Pads have a long evolving envelope, so I'm gonna add release here, a little bit of release there, attack as well. Definitely want long release so things just kind of flow into each other. And you know, you can load up a pad, you know, patch or whatever. But yeah, pads are one of the easiest sounds to make. When I was a kid and I would be able to, like, you know, have access to whatever keyboard was around, like at school or whatever, I would just cycle through all the pad patches and then just play tones. Still doing it. Moody. Okay, so we got that moody ting in there. So now I go into some type of sample. And this can be, again, a drone or... no, I don't want... Actually, no, I do. So I'm going to grab some ambience. Ooh, that's good. I'm always down for some burbs. Alright, so on this, now I have full control of this sample itself, and I can even use this just in here. You know, I can granulize it just in straight up simpler, because in Omnisphere, I'm able to use samplers with granular functions. You know, so it's like, really, this is Omnisphere. Alright, so that's really cool though, you know, because I can go into any of these effects, and I'm actually going to throw a delay on here, and then we're going to go ping pong. Obviously we're going to mix that in, you know, and not make it just like in front, because this is the moody pad patch. It's not the moody bird patch, you know. Stupid bird, get out of the way. Let's put a hospital in there, fuck it. Okay, so let's drop a grain delay on this bad boy. Funky. Okay, so now I want to add something a little bit rhythmic. So let's go into the sample library. And if you're ever inclined to just, you know, actually organize your shit, this is kind of what it should look like. Okay, so what I want to use is just some like, kind of like orchestral stuff. Oh shit, bro. Fuck, dude. The vibe on that. No. Alright, so let's go into something else here. Oh, perfect. Yeah, there we go. All right, so this is like what I would make for some type of like really ambient kind of like sound design piece, but also for like breaks and all types of shit. So it's like literally just me stacking samples on top of one synth sound, and this synth sound is like literally at 5% mass right now, just because I'm like just making an example of what I can put on here. So this would be kind of like absinthe or some other crazy synth that I can go and put something on top of. So yeah, that's kind of like it with looping, and with FM really, because FM in here is kind of like the biggest thing. We were doing that in here. I do want to show one more form of that just because it's really cool. And I don't know if anybody uses FM8 effects, but FM8 effects is actually very OP. So I don't know if you watch my other streams, but I do go and do this for a lot of my resamples and stuff, and I'll go and create pretty much just an audio route so I can go in and out of one track just so I can trigger something on that track, which is a VST that requires MIDI in order for it to actually generate something. So I can use serum effects like this, reactor effects, absinthe effects, any Native Instruments effect allows you to do this. So patched into to instrument, which is going to be the one I have FM8 effects on. Now I can patch into FM8 effects, and then when I play a note here, it should trigger. Let's go pre-effects. There we go. All right, so now I am playing FM8, and I'm actually hearing none of my sample. So FM8, quick overview. How do I get into my operators? Hit ops. There they are. So how do you hear any incoming sound? Right click on in, route to the output. It works. Okay, so now with that in mind, I can take that from the output. So that sounds really cool right now because I'm actually using one-to-one modulation on my sawtooth, which we haven't talked that much about yet, and I do make that a point in the notes there. But it'll create very, very interesting harmonic textures when you do one-to-one ratio on a sawtooth. That's something to keep in mind. Okay, so I'm just going to go directly to the output here, and then I'm going to route some modulation into it. Alright, so now let's hear what it sounds like if I go sampler as modulator and carrier FMate. Now I'm using my sampler as an FM modulator, similar to the way a radio would modulate music onto this blasted out noise frequency. Alright, so obviously you're not limited here. I can use all of these as part of this instrument rack, which again is unlimited in its construction here with just the design of instrument rack being the way it is. And then I can go and daisy chain this. So I could go and put it in a rack like this and stack up as many FM8s as my computer can handle. I just need to create another MIDI track per FM8 so they each get their own line of MIDI. So yeah, it's really, really deep with how deep you can actually go into here. Can't you put an incoming signal into any hardware synth? Yes. So say if you were gonna go and, I mean, yes and no to that. You know, some things don't allow you to do certain types of signals if they're just like a little bit more basic, but anything that's like, you know, semi-modular or has the capability for a voltage. Voltage is audio, so voltage is voltage. Doesn't matter where you go, you know. So it's not gonna alter the way, you know, anything about it. You're just able to do it as long as it accepts voltage, but you have to convert it out, you know. Hey, what's up, hooligan? All right, so you know, that should just, you know, kind of open up your mind to using this. How do you route it? You have to go and set up a MIDI track to, you know, input to the track that FM8 effects is on. Output, set it back to the track that FM8 effects is on. Set the monitoring to in, so you never have to record enable it, and it just it's free flowing like a bus, and that's how bus processing works in Ableton. One day you'll be able to have like a MIDI sidechain button on VSTs. Right now we only have sidechain capabilities on audio VSTs. One day. And I've tried doing stuff like this in like Fruity Loops and Logic. It's a little bit more of a workaround. Just in Ableton, Ableton just really set up for, you know, splitting out MIDI to a lot of different things just for live production stuff. So it's really optimized for this kind of stuff. Because this is something you would have to do to set up a hardware synth to respond to Ableton. Okay, so definitely jump into that and, you know, experiment. You know, you can try any of these waveforms and run any signal into it. Again, just a pad. So I can put anything into here. I can also put any processing in between this. Say if I wanted to go and FM the reverb. Yes, there's nothing on the MIDI track. MIDI track needs to be blank. Say if you wanted to go and put on some type of effect or anything to that, you just have to patch it post effects. Effect meaning MIDI effects. Any MIDI effects, if you want them to go into this, you have to patch it post effects. Post effects, again, means the MIDI effects, not the audio effects. Again, MIDI, not audio. Before this, not after. Okay, so what was that? Pre-effects. That patches before MIDI effects, post effects patches after MIDI effects. Crazy. Okay, so gonna move on from this. We're gonna talk a little bit about slicing. So slicing is super cool, just because it's like really common in a lot of different styles of like IDM and all that shit. And I think you guys see me like edit audio, kind of like I'm making glitch effects and all that stuff, similar to the way I was just like randomizing this. So there's a bunch of ways to like make glitch effects and beat repeats and all that type of stuff. Really the big thing here is like understanding what Rex means. So if you don't even know Reason at all, or even why Reason is, you know, the OG, you know, it's because of the Rex player. And I think I did say, you know, what was the first DAW to ever have warping, and that was Sony Acid Pro and like Audacity. So it was like those two programs were the ones that really innovated, you know, everything else, because that allowed for pitch and time to be unlinked and all that stuff. What Rex brought to the table is it sliced up any type of like rhythmic audio or anything you can just like put a slice into, and then slice that sample up into a bunch of different pieces. So if I get an amen break here, drop it into here, right click, you can slice to new MIDI track, you convert to drums, but what a Rex player does is it slices it to a new MIDI track. These are converting MIDI, so you want to do this. So now, like, say if you knew exactly how many pieces were in this based on the warp markers, and this is without, you know, saying for every DAW, and I believe the Fruity Loops, like, was that like the pattern designer kind of works like this as well. They have that like sequencer thing that you can go and like import into each clip and stuff, and that's pretty cool. I really like that, and the melody designer. So each one of these warp markers will be converted into a pad if I set it to do it based on transient or warp marker. And warp marker is going to do it exactly to the warp marker. Transient might pick up more than one, you know, because it's going to reread it. So I might make a little warp marker right here or something like that. So I'm just going to do it based off warp marker. So now, and I even say this in here, it should kind of slice it into a playback, you know, that's, I guess, let me zoom out here. Stupid ting. Thank you for the follow. Shit scares me every time. I really need to make a chiller follow sound. But yeah, so pretty much, you know, this can be really cool live kind of playback thing, and you can slice them up into different little MIDI hits, and the MIDI will allow you to play it back like this. So, oh, whoops. All right, so let's try that again, because I actually only have one warp marker active here. So you do need those warp markers to be active. Slice the new MIDI track. Let's just do it based on transient. All right, so now this amen break is being played back really, really fast, but now it's being played back from me. So what does this allow me to do? It allows me to, you know, say if I was just like playing this back normally, I can use my keyboard to play back. All right, so what I'm doing here is sample and hold. Why is this cool? Because everything is pre-routed for you buy Ableton's, slice engine. And this is something that Rex would do for you as well. So what's cool about this is I can manipulate MIDI again, just the way I was saying, to change the rhythm of this actual break without actually changing any audio, stretching anything, do anything like that. It's actually just MIDI being played back. So I can go and double time this, by speeding it up, or I can slow it, half time it. So when sustain is on, pretty much, it will hold the loop. And then if you have loop link off, completely, or I guess set to 0, it turns the loop off. And notice right here, that little light comes on and off. And this is a macro set in here where, let's go to the loop length. There's a lot of macros. Loop length, sample on, set to 1. And so there's a lot of them because it makes one of these macro sets per slice automatically. So I can modulate this with like Max for Live or something like that. And this I can use as a MIDI effect, or I can use as an audio effect. MIDI effect allows me to re-trigger from MIDI. Audio just kind of runs. And I believe re-trigger signifies like an anchor point. And we actually talked about what anchor means with Serum, and that means playback starts the LFO. So I'm going to map this to like loop length. Alright, so what else is cool with this? Arpeggiators. Arpeggiators are crazy with this too. So with an arpeggiator, it does exactly what an arpeggiator does. Plays arpeggios. So if there's only like 2 octaves of range, we should only do 1 step. And then play at the bottom. Alright, so really cool shit. This is the kind of shit that, you don't think about doing because it's not built in for you. Exactly, Miri. Like, that's the shit that's like jungle, drum bass, IDM, all over the place. Right, so now let's try this actually in MIDI form, because if I use this in MIDI form, now it's going to respond to the notes coming out of the arpeggiator. So now I can sync up a bunch of other stuff. This is like Max for Live kind of things that make sampling like super crazy. we're doing pretty good on time. So it's kind of like where I'm going to end with like the slicing stuff, and then we're going to talk about phrasing and resampling and stuff along with some of the saturation things. So saturation is actually going to be more of a processing thing. And we've talked about that a bit already, and that's going to be like a huge thing in like the processing 101 class is like compressors, EQ, saturation, all dynamics. So that includes other types of compressors, not just multiband and OTT, also understanding OTT and all that stuff. OTT is a great thing, but it is even better when you know how to use it and not just crush it. So I'm going to drop a little LFO in here. I'll find it. There it is. All right, so obviously it's crazy, and it's also beat locked, so I can just do anything and put it in any tempo I want. All right, so another thing just to rehash on, because we talked about this last week in sampling, just with Drum Rack specifically, is some of these functions in here. And oh Lord, Live is doing its, or I'm sorry, Max is doing its thing right now. At least it's not like leaving the LFO skins just like somewhere on the frame. All right, so I want to make these choke groups so they don't like overlap each other. Highlight all, send the one. Sick. It used to not work like that, dude. Like, believe it or not, you had to go and put everything in a choke group one by one back in like Ableton 8 and halfway through 9. Alright, so I can add notes into this and then kind of add a little bit more randomization, hold down notes, have them go in here. So arpeggiators really kind of like add a cool like little vibe in here. Okay, so now like Yeah, exactly. It's just getting to breakcore and just all types of jungle. So now that we're like kind of like familiar with that, I want to talk about beat repeats. So beat repeats kind of do a similar thing, but you know they're actually just chopping in you know sampled material, literal sampled material, and then repeating it. Okay, so what's happening right now? And a lot of beat repeats actually work this way. So what's happening in this beat repeat specifically? Let's zoom in a little bit on this boy. Oh yeah. So yeah, Mary, it's actually really similar to gross beat, and Free Loops is really based around a lot of this stuff. And I'm sorry, I keep on calling it by its like its baby name, but you know, FL is dope. Okay, so interval, what's that mean? That means this is how long the pretty much until the reset of this beat repeat. When is it going to take that sample? So this offsets where exactly it's going to start, where that interval is going to start. So this is going to be 16 bars or 4 bars. So every 16 bars is going to repeat. So this is cool for like, you know, live stuff. Like if say you do have those types of sections where it is 4 bars and you want to create like a little thing on the beginning. So now gate is how long to repeat. And chance means that every interval it's going to 100% take a sample. 50% chance less. Really depends on how long you want the interval. Say if you were gonna go and have it happen every 16 bars, then you would probably want it to be on 100% always. But if it was really short interval, like say half a beat here, I would probably put it like down here, so it's not always doing this really consistent thing. It's kind of going all over the place. All right, so then your grid is gonna say how fast should this beat repeat be. So then you can add variation to that. So every time it goes through its interval phase, it re-triggers this grid and changes the size. So you can tell it no triplets, please, and it won't use triplets. And you can tell it how to trigger meaning interval, really, and turn on when the playback starts. Auto is going to kind of read transients. So it's going to respond to transients, and then when everything's really defined, it's going to actually trigger a variation. So you can kind of like hit the snare harder or something like that, and it'll kind of trigger from that. Also respond a little bit more to chance as well. So I like to set it around 16 or 8, somewhere around here, just so it's like really consistent. And that's not really something that sounds too in time and gridded, because it's literally switching the grid size. So it's kind of randomizing this. So every time it goes through its interval and this criteria is fit, so 1/8 note passes by, it varies the actual grid size. So pitch and pitch decay. So if I extend my gate here and I have no pitch decay, it's just going to repitch these second samples. So every sample after the initial slice is going to be pitched down. If I turn on decay, it's going to gradually get there. All right, so why is it making that kind of like tone now? And that's because it's actually repeating so quickly. It's doing like a sample and hold. And that's super cool because now you can use this as kind of like a function here, and you actually know that it pretty much will make this sound always. All right, so let's zoom back out here. So this thing is really simple to use. Mix is going to mean that it just mixes in the original signal and mixes in the beat repeat with it. Instrument means it's pretty much going to only trigger when the beat repeat triggers. And gate means that it's only gonna have sound when it triggers. So mix is kind of a good balance between the two. And this little grayed outline kind of signifies whether or not there's some type of parallel route going on. Then you can add a filter to your repeated sound. Carmack used beat repeat in his rhythm roulette beat to get like a feedback sounding lead. I think Corpus was in the chain too, but it sounded dope. Yeah, definitely. And so like, you know, just in what you were saying there with like feedback stuff, you know, especially because there's any type of impulse or transient that's going to resonate some type of delay really hard and then create a lot of like tension and stuff. So say if you did put on Corpus, that can actually sound super cool. But, you know, I'd probably do like plate or string. Yeah, so that sounds pretty crazy. And they also have like different presets in here that are good for this too. Oof! Ouchie! That hurt me a lot. Alright, so I'm gonna do that again. But yeah, anyways. So yeah, that's kind of it for, you know, what I wanted to kind of talk about with that. So you can make a lot of really cool stuff with it. Again, I'm about to get into like some melodic shit. So I kind of want to talk a little bit more about you know, just delays and resampling just a little bit. So resampling, this, you know, kind of like goes without saying for everything we've already been doing. And it's like, make your stuff by yourself and then go and put it back into a synth. So resampling means a couple different things. So resizing audio by reducing or increasing its number of samples. So it's stretched and processed, but then re-recorded digitally So pretty much you're gonna have to just kind of understand what that means. And what does reamping mean? Reamping means sending the signal out and putting it into a real medium, which is like, putting it out of a amp and miking that amp up and then making that your bass line pretty much. And then also with like graphic artists and stuff, a lot of people actually run their graphic art, outside of the computer and then take pictures of that and resample it. So they can do a lot of again, degradation and glitch effects and stuff like that, and then bring it back and resample it. Chris, like, he definitely does, and he like talked about that at some point where he like mics up some of his synths from outside of his studio, and that's exactly. So you can do that with anything really, and that was the point of me talking about what reamping means last time. What you can do with stuff that you're sampling, because that is part of sampling. Lauren is sampling himself by sampling the sound of his actual monitors because he wasn't able to capture that inside of the actual DAW. He was like, I like the way it sounds in here. And so that is like a huge decision-making process where you're able to say, not only does this sound good, but it sounds good from right here specifically. So when you're an audio engineer, something I learned was if it sounds good from where you're standing, put a mic there. So like when you're miking up like drums or something like that, you're just like, oh, but from right here in the room, it's just like popping, yo. And it might, that could be one little pocket of the room that's not being like phased out by its like construction. And you just happen to walk through it. That's something you can't really see. Your ears can see it though. So you have to trust your ears. And when you hear something sound good, you got to think, does it sound like that normally? Can I go and put it through that? Can I record it and put it back in there? And would it add to the original, And reamping is a huge thing for that. You can send stuff into VCV Rack and back out. Anything that you're going and using, can be used as potential material like that. Some people like to run Instagram stories through amp, why not? Fuck it. I don't really do that because that's just kind of weird, but I mean, it's fine. It's totally chill, but I just like to, sample shit that's coming from my shit. So that's a really cool thing, keep that in mind. And also start to brainstorm, what would your shit sound cool in, how are you going to mic up your monitors like Lauren? Because if you mic up your monitors, it doesn't mean you're going to sound like Lauren. That's for sure. All right. So, we talked about absinthe a little bit and grain delays and saturation. And actually, these two things kind of relate with convolution and delay. So, saturation, we talked about what second order harmonics are. And so that's generating harmonics that weren't there, but from harmonics that were there. So that's transforming, adding to the original work, so saturation is a huge way to transform shit. So when I work with samples a lot, and let's just bring up an acapella because this is something that's super relevant. Obviously I'm going to go straight to Tupac. That's not even a question, obviously. So, and I say that because I'm from California. Obviously, I'm not going to go to Biggie first, even though I respect him. Exactly. Reamp those fucking AirPods, bro. I want it to sound like it's already in the AirPod. You can get crazy sounds. The contact mic and those are incredibly cheap. I let Dangle Off Cigar Box Kalimba I made and makes this cool distorted sound since it's fully on. Yeah, exactly. So you can definitely make really cool stuff with contact mics. Contact mics, and I even brought this up in I think the first class, where it was like you can make a reverb chamber out of anything, any surface, anything that's going to be inside of you know, like any medium, you know, hence why reverb chambers were actually a thing. Okay, so transforming with saturation, we're not going to go too deep on what wave shaping does, but you know, we'll just put some like hardcore wave shaping on this. So if you wanted to like make this sound like really gritty and shit, and like make it sound like it's been through some shit, like this sample's been through some shit, bro. And this is something I do to a lot of samples. Is whoops. We can use auto filter or any other filter. So I'm gonna actually stick in trash, but I'm just gonna open this up so I can compare. But okay, so how does the filter work in here? So really simple. You just click on it. You tell the filter what to be. So clean, I want it to be a high pass, because I'll eventually want this to band pass. So this changes my Q. It can be really, really sharp. So that's not just joking. It's not joking on that height. All right, so that's plus about like 40 dB up there. So it can like super over resonate. What I want to do is create a band pass. And so I'm gonna grab number 6 up here, and I'm going to create some type of filter again. You know, so this is just like Volcano. And I can choose the type of filter, a resonant one, and make it a low pass filter, or I can even make this a band pass filter. I want to be able to control both cutoffs though, so I'm going to make a low pass. We're going to make that retro.
Okay.
Whoa.
And talk about my back, I'm kind of schizophrenic. I'm in this shit to win it, cause life's a wheel of fucking. And talk about my
all right, so I'm gonna high pass it, kind of degrade it a bit.
talk about my back, I'm kind of schizophrenic. I'm in this shit to win it, cause life's a wheel of fucking. And talk
Because life's a wheel of fucking. All right, so I can push this up and clip it, or I can pull it down and then clip it over here. So if I pull this down or make it concave or exponential, then it will be a little bit cleaner. It won't be as loud. If I expand this, so the higher this line is, closer to this line, the louder it's going to be. That's a good rule of thumb. Just a basic way to understand it with your inner child's perspective. When this closer, it go real loud. Watch out if you go like that, because it's going to smash you in the face, so careful. Bit depth is very, you know, finicky.
and talk about my back, I'm kind of schizophrenic. I'm in this shit to win it, cause life's a wheel of fucking. And talk about my back, I'm kind of schizophrenic. I'm in this shit to win it, cause life's a wheel of fucking. And talk about
All right, so I just want to add a little bit of breakup on there. So I'm just going to go on to that thing I was just saying, where the closer this is, the more it clips, the louder it gets if it's higher up. So I can clip it and make that clipping quiet. If I'm going to go and, you know, create a little bit of clipping. All right, so now I can use the convolution and convolve this into a new space. Again, this is another sample. And I want to go and kind of look at the Convolution Pro and Max for Live. We can show out like both are accessible like this. And I believe I can load an impulse response from anything in here. Say if I go into Milano's sample pack. Book it. And shout out Milano. This is like for his Elastic EP. Shit was tight. Milano's a homie. Oh, and it says Milano's not a homie. It says, Milano, get out of here. Actually, I have to create a folder first and then throw a bunch of shit in there. So it's not as easy as the Convolution Reverb Pro. I can definitely get Milano on that Convolution Reverb though. So I'm gonna load this into like a little bit of weird space, actually, not just the body stuff. Gonna get a thud. So this spreads out the stereo field, and then this separates the millisecond values. So I can do this along with delay. All right, so now I'm putting this delay before my trash and my convolution. All right, so that's cool with trash. Let's check out Saturn. So Saturn is really cool just because you can do, again, feedback stuff, kind of like what Ori was saying there. And this is something I've seen a bunch of people do. And pretty much it's just running the feedback on each band here. This is a really crucial thing to dial in. If you have it set to a high frequency, it's going to be really, really high. So you got to be careful with that. And this dynamics actually does make a difference on what kind of audio is flowing through it.
I'm in this shit to win it, cause life's a wheel of fucking. And talk about my back, I'm kinda schizophrenic. I'm in this shit to win it, cause life's a wheel of fucking. And talk.
So that high sizzle can get really, really bad. So I'm just going to keep it around 75%. And I do make that a rule of thumb for all feedback delays. All right, so that's cool. And auto mute is a good thing. Make sure auto mute is on. So, you can modulate that with a ton of stuff. And then, just hook it directly into the frequency, just like you do with any other fab filter thing with modulation. So now I'm randomizing this again. This should be able to like glide in between each note pretty much. They have like a glide value, but pretty much what this means is it's going to pretty much be like modulating anywhere from here to there. I believe I can add a few more steps, like up to 8. Oh, how far can we go? Let's keep going. 16.
behind my back, I'm kind of getting ready. I'm in the shit to win it, cause like the wheel of fortune. They talk behind my back, I'm kind of getting ready. I'm in the shit to win it, cause like the wheel of fortune. They talk behind my back, I'm kind of getting ready. I'm in the shit to win it, cause like the wheel of fortune.
All right, we don't need 16 steps. That's just crazy, dude. 8 is enough. 4 is enough. All right, so you can do a lot of crazy shit with that. Again, randomizing shit, really cool. Control the feedback. Don't go like too crazy with it, or else you will hurt yourself. And you do not want to hurt yourself. Sound designing with your headphones on. That's definitely something you don't want to do. And I have this turned down way low because I didn't want to. Because that shit can get really loud. It would have been a lot louder had I not have it turned down. But you know. So finally, let's get into just like the last little piece here, and it's going to be like, I guess, you know, just kind of like the end of today, because this is all this stuff here that I wrote out. I'm not going to go through all of it, literally not going to go through it like really at all, because what this is really gearing you up for is for like where I want to get to with not sound design or mixing anymore, but actual production, like how to make a track and stuff, and how to start assimilating influence. And this is like sampling a person, you know, taking a piece of influence from somebody and not finding and actually finding your own sound through it. So, you know, it's good to know where the actual genre is, you know, with its style, and then also and then also like really be able to understand where they come from. So the point I'm making is, so if you make a selection of a sample and love the vibe, but you can't find a way to support it, you know, in your track, I mean, first you must not compare yourself to any specific artist or person. So, you know, that is going to be the thing that holds you back the most in everything in life, is to not compare yourself to one person. Do not compare yourself to one person. One person is a bad thing to compare yourself to, because if you're like obsessed with one artist, you know, and you really want to be like them, you're going to end up sounding like them, and you know, eventually you'll have to kill them, you know, as an artist, not as a person. Please do not even hurt anybody, but you know, that essentially you will have to take over for what they built, because you're not adding to it. All you're doing is taking from what they built and capitalizing on it, and you're not really respecting their art so much. And it's not so objective, you know. It's actually just kind of like respecting boundaries of people, you know. It's I guess that could be objective, you know. It is my opinion that is what a boundary is, but you know, to this point here, John Lennon and Paul McCartney innovated pop music because they would only record riffs they could play again after playing once. So that means they stuck with them immediately, capturing only earworms they would generate. It made the formula for the simplicity of the 3-chord phrase and modern pop top 40 music, and how it would be made then on after. Like then on after meaning from when they did that, they've continued to do it all the way up until now. And there's a ton of shit online about that. You know, and like, you know, that's something that I've kept with myself for a long time, you know. And so what I think about that is, you know, what's that for me? I'm not writing fucking Beatles music. Never have I ever. But, you know, another example here, i.e. Gesaffelstein to techno, Skrillex to dubstep, Many trying to emulate what Gesaffelstein did for techno, but many don't call back to the original style he was emulating. The Hacker, to name one, you know? And if we listen to The Hacker, you'll be able to hear, because this guy's pre-Gesaffelstein, keep in mind, and he was one of Gesaffelstein's friends. So there's two things there, you know, that they were in contact and they were around the same time. So it's like mid to early 2000s. And, you know, so same thing with Skrillex, you know, thousands of Skrillex clones, but to really understand where he came from is to know the genres of that era, say 2007 to 2012, where drum and bass and electro and dubstep were all convening for the big, you know, Skrillex fucking epidemic of 2012, then on after as well, where, you know, he formed a new genre, pretty much melodic dubstep, by fusing drum and bass, electro, and putting that on dubstep, you know, because of the fact that he learned most of his style from, you know, from like people like Noisia, like Ties or something like that. Not to say that they are responsible for his style, because to teach somebody is not to be responsible for what they do with that teaching. You are not, you know, responsible for that. It's not your thing to claim as a result of you. Yes, definitely you being here would have made that impossible, you know, I guess. And, you know, deadmau5 also coming together to make that happen. But that's just really his story, you know. It's just one story. And it's a lot of everybody's story, too. It kind of sounds similar to that. You know, say somebody who creates a new genre, does a new thing. That's their story, you know. They look up to somebody, they do their thing because they look up not only to one person but to many people. And to do that, it really takes confidence in both your own sound, your trajectory with your music, where you've been with your music, you know. So someone who doesn't make this decision, you know, and they don't add, they subtract from it. They say, I love that artist, and they take the exact formula of their songs, and then they do exactly what they do. You know, that's one way to start, but that is training wheels. That is not, you know, knowing, you know, these kind of formula. This formula is different from, say, putting somebody's track in your track and, you know, saying that he does it this many bars, that's how many bars I should do it. You know, this is something you should know as a DJ. As a DJ, you should know this stuff. You know, like with dubstep and deep, it's usually 8 bars, you know, varying on tempo. If it's at 70, it's usually 8 bars. If it's at 140, it's usually 16 bars. And this is how long a phrase should be. This is stuff that Skrillex changed. How long a phrase should be. What should be in that phrase. Should there be a bass on the downbeat going into a consistent bass line? You know, and that's kind of the big thing. Bass on the downbeat goes into a consistent bass line, has a very digestible, you know, bass line. So it hits harder and harder and harder. It's like 2-finger death punch, you know, but repeatedly. So what happened, you know, say with even like Skrillex, like, and just techno and electro, is they would drop themselves again 16 bars in. So you would have another build up, maybe a bar breakout, and that creates more energy. That's not something you do just because Skrillex did. That's something you do because that's what goes off live, you know? And that's something you know as a DJ. As a DJ, you know that shit because you play these songs. You know the songs that go off live. How are you going to add to it, not take from it? Because opportunists take from things that go off now. They use the tried and true thing that will make them money and get them booked. You know, not the risky thing, which is know this shit, try to add to it. You know, hence again, why rhythm sounds the same and all those other things sound the same. Including drum bass in a lot of different ways, and halftime as well. And that's because a lot of people adhere to the genre style, and it makes it really fun, you know? But to take into account how to phrase your samples and resamples in here, you do have to repeat stuff. You do have to make it repetitive in order for people to digest it. What does digest mean? It means be able to dance to it as a techno track, as a house track, as a drum and bass track. Anytime you veer off from these guidelines of not even like just these guidelines, there's so many more. Hence why I only highlighted that these are for the drops specifically. The drops only. This is all I'm talking about here. And why? Because this is just like a first dose of like where sampling goes to eventually. You know, as somebody who gets influenced by every piece of audio they listen to, their sonic diet. What are you listening to on the regular is what you're going to eventually make. You know, you are what you eat. That's why I call it sonic diet. So, you know, of course, my understanding of trap, left field, and hip hop is a little bit more specific on this, just because these are very different. But they all take from each other, and this is why hip hop and trap have been around for so long. You know, same thing with dubstep. You know, because they're I guess amalgamous. They can form into anything the user or artist wants them to be, because the format is so lenient. Like hip hop, you know, has like R&B styles. It has, you know, lo-fi style. Trap, you know, as well can be considered hip hop, you know, and then like Dirty South, hyphy, twerk, all that stuff. Those are all different sects of these things, but they're doing different tempos, different styles and vibes. But they definitely have a deliverable format that allows you to exploit, you know? So say if you're a techno producer and you want to repeat the same bass line for 32 bars, slightly modulate the fill for every 4 to 8 bars, 16 bars, and then have a drop that's 64 bars in a techno song that's 6 to 8 minutes. So that's like a Berlin techno track, like very long and very repetitive, but it goes off live. Just constant tension, everybody just feeling it, you know, because 64 bars of a riser creates so much tension. If people are on drugs, they're just losing their shit. So then every 32 bars between the A and B section, which I signify as every 16 bars, it switches up A section to B section, you know, so it allows you to redrop and do a ton of other things with it and really exploit the genre in a lot of different ways. Like especially with OG dubstep and deep dubstep, like those are different. Those are different than rhythm. Rhythm and melodic dubstep are now kind of what, you know, the original melodic dubstep thing was. Everybody who is doing that and wants to still work has to make rhythm. So that is what I consider to be the mainstream dubstep, I suppose. And it's very cookie cutter with its style. You know, a lot of the new people doing rhythm now, say like more Kismet, Akios, and a lot of the newer guys on Never Say Die are killing it. And they're the ones that are going to be the future, because they're actually changing the game with a lot of shit. Same thing with like Sudden Death in a lot of different ways. Talk shit about what he's done. Kid has some good sounds, and that is what sets him apart in that scene. You know, because it's like, yes, they all sound the same, but yes, they are all able to rinse out each other's tracks in the same set. So that is kind of like the calling card of a genre. You know, if you really hate that about rhythm, don't make rhythm. Easy. Don't make it. You know, if you hate that, don't do it. Why are you doing it? Because you want money. Okay. Well, then don't complain when everybody's making fucking rhythm in the scene, because they're making that same exact decision. You know, because it's risky. It's risky to do this. It's risky to know your shit and like go into that and like really double down. You know, it's like you're not going to be the next Saruda by going and fucking adhering to what everybody else is doing. You know, that's one big reason why I respect him a lot. Just because he really takes control of that, you know? Okay, so, you know, like we talked about a lot of stuff here, and I do want to kind of talk about phrasing more. So that is going to be part of next week in a big way. So it's going to be pretty much all implementation next week. Because now I've talked about a lot of this shit that's like really useful for sampling and for applying your sounds and stuff. So You know, I had that sound I had in here, but I'm actually just gonna delete all of them. Just to kind of like talk about melodic samples and stuff like that. You know, just because like, you know, a lot of you guys have like questions about like, say like that track I just released. Holy shit, the vibraphone. So when choosing a sample to implement, say like melodically, you want to find something that you kind of like hear and get emotional response from. Okay, so I like that. Mainly because it has like that really clean note in there, and it also has kind of a cool little rhythm. So, you know, first thing you want to do when deciding like what you're going to do with the sample is set a tempo. You know, where do you kind of want to go with it? If it doesn't really work there, change the tempo. You know, I speed up a lot of like hip hop tracks, a lot that end up coming like garage tracks or whatever, you know, just whatever it kind of fits into at the time. All right, so I'm gonna warp this. All right, so I want to make sure it's in time, so I'm gonna kind of load up a little, just a beat for, you know, just like a loop of a beat. All right, so that kind of rolls, you know, so it rolls back into itself. And I had this little like melody line that I was like, oh, that sounds cool, consistent. And then, all right, so how did I warp this so quickly? So let's actually talk about that really quick before I go and just kind of mess with it further. Ooh, whoops. Okay, so when you have the warp marker just set on one marker here, like say this is your downbeat, it's actually not even perfect. So I want to drag that down to the 1 here. And then if I want the rest of this to be in time, what I can do is I can type in the original tempo of this, or, and that's cool if you're going to make a set in Ableton, like DJ a set, or you can accordion warp or elastic warp. This is, you know, a technique you can do in every DAW that is warping. And without creating a warp marker, you can trim where that transient should be in time. So if this is supposed to be right here, it'll move it there, but it'll also change the timing of every other sample. So, you know, say if everything gets a little bit off time, I can go to my last beat and just make sure that's on time. And then these will get their natural fill back. You know what I mean? So the natural fill will be once you settle like your main downbeats. So you do want it to be somewhat in time, hitting that grid. So here's the way it looked originally. Drag this to the downbeat, and then I dragged this, and it has to be a bracket. If you make any breakpoint there, now it's only going to make breakpoints when I highlight that. So you do have to have only one breakpoint there while you do that. And again, it's called elastic warping or accordion style warping. And I usually, you know, set my first downbeat, and then I kind of modulate where it kind of veers off. So that 4th beat, I want to make sure it's still in time. Okay, so I got that sample, you know, and that sounds cool. Like that would be a vibe, and I already have like ideas for like bass lines I want to put in there because I already know like how I want to phrase it. You know, I know that I want it to be like downbeat, half a bar right here, just because it's at 90, it's a little bit fast. So like brump, cut, bing, 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 whop. So it's downbeat, half a bar, and then we have consistent bass that's going for at least 1 to 2 bars here, just so I can really capitalize on the swing and the beat, and then create a very spacious fill and phrase. Ori, to your question, no, I am not holding any modifiers when I do this. I'm literally just hand-free. Got to make sure the warp marker is off. Any other spots here? And another cool thing, actually, let's go back. Okay, so I'm going to reset these warp markers. And if I highlight all of these guys at the same time, it'll warp them all at the same time as well. So I'm going to zoom out here. I would actually reset my whole loop here. Let's do this. Just going to copy it over. So now we have this little kind of slashed out color line there, and it's going to warp all of them at the same time, and you can see in the counter up here when I do that, it moves all of them, and that's when they're highlighted. So that's really cool. I like being able to warp multiple clips at the same time. In Pro Tools, that required me to create warp groups and all types of other things that were a complete waste of time. All right, so I made another point about implementation with samples, about kind of finding the root note, and I do want to talk about this today before we're done. You know, just so I don't have to like introduce it for the first time next week. So find a melodic sample. You know, Liquid Soul, probably going to be some good one shots in here. So I'm going to find something. So it's really nice when your sample says the root note, so you know that this is in G. It's playing more than one note, so you know it's not really G. There's a couple other notes in there. Let's try synth. That's pretty nice. All right, so really nice melodic sample. You know, say if you were going to go and design some samples and you wanted to make like really nice stuff you know you'd use, listen to a bunch of samples you would use. That's your first clue on how you should be making samples for yourself. You know, if you like F sharp minor ninth chords, then you should be making samples as F sharp minor ninth chords, and you can drop them in samplers and use them like that. All right, so what was I just doing? I was just playing a phrase that was 2 bars long, and it was just like a repeatable phrase. It sounded nice. It was some nice notes, and it moved around nice. So it was like all stuff that I like really. So it's like, how can I do that with my own shit? Because I really want to take that, you know, concept and just make it more original. Like, how can I be more original with it and more myself? You know, find some chords first, not some Reese's. That's it's gonna be hard. I got a lot of Reese's, but I actually know where some chords are. Here. Okay, so it's saying that this is too big. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and drag it in here. A sample like that much. Consolidate. So quick on that solid state. Beautiful. And then just gonna drag and drop that into my MIDI. All right, so that sounds cool. You know, I'm just like focusing on a chord that I like. It's really going to be hard for me to go and find the root note of this. So what can I do to go and find that root note? Meaning, what is the pitch of this chord when I play C? That is what I'm defining as the root note. So I can go and put this in an instrument rack. You can load up a parallel track with just a sine wave, play that up high so you can hear the pitch. So it sounds a little bit flat, and this is going to be like more theory stuff too, because you're going to have to do a little bit of ear training in order to be able to kind of recognize when it's out of tune. And I always take advantage, or I guess take for granted, how my hearing is just with being able to recognize notes. But if you can get this to register on some type of, you know, tuner, or say the tuner's not working and it really does not like reverb material, so you can kind of find the root note here. Okay, so I'm playing C here, and it's actually the lowest harmonic, and we have a little snapshot. It's playing C3, and the highest harmonic, which actually is the first one that comes in when I trigger the sample, is an A6, which is a fifth. Actually, no, that's a